For the second time in India's history, the Union Budget was presented on a Sunday. Keeping in accordance with existing norms, the stock exchanges were also open for a special trading session. Investors reacted to the announcements in real time. Stocks were down significantly as the markets did not take to the Finance Minister's 1 hour and 25-minute budget speech too well. Nifty ended over 1% lower, and the blue chip Sensex index also closed more than 1% in the red. That was largely due to a hike in securities transaction tax. Futures and options trading will get costlier, especially for high-frequency traders and wealthy players. The securities transaction tax, or the STT, remember, will increase to 0.05% and options to 0.15%. Stock buybacks will get cheaper for investors but more expensive for promoters. Remember, the budget was clear on its focused spending plan. The capital expenditure was increased to 12.2 trillion rupees or $318 billion, which is up from 11.11 trillion rupees last year. NRIs and foreign portfolio investors get major reprieve, largely due to increased investment limits. The government expects to receive 3.16 trillion rupees from the Reserve Bank of India and the public sector banks in FY27.
One of the big things of this government right from the start is the great emphasis on macro fiscal stability. Okay. So this we saw during the pandemic, which was when I was not in government, and when it was done very carefully and so on. So that underlies the whole approach to fiscal stability. But it's kind of even more important today because the fiscal restraint makes it possible for monetary policy to play a bigger role. So we know from history that one of the good things is when you are in a period of uncertainty, you want to have a relatively tighter fiscal policy and then allow monetary policy to be more expansive if needed. So that combination has historically in countries across the world proved to be the best way of dealing with it.
In terms of schemes, the Finance Minister announced the launch of India Semiconductor Mission, or the ISM, that will give 40,000 crore rupees for electronics components production. The launch of Biopharma Shakti with an outlay of 10,000 crore rupees. The launch of a 2,000 crore rupees subsidy for UPI and RuPay. Highlighting the government's infrastructure push, Sitharaman announced the launch of 7 high-speed rail corridors. The launch of Khelo India Mission to put more money in domestic sports development, ABD rare earth corridors in 4 states. Remember, while no major announcements related to personal income tax were made, certain sectors were set to benefit. Some items like microwave ovens and drugs for rare cancers are set to get cheaper. Taxes were cut on overseas education and medical remittances. Personal use imports, nuts and fish caught by Indian fishermen, nuclear power goods, critical minerals, lithium ion cells and energy equipment. On the other hand, some are set to become costlier. Income tax misreporting, alcoholic liquor, minerals, scrap sales, umbrellas and umbrella parts, cranberries and blueberries, as well as duties on chewing tobacco, zarda, gutka, they're all hiked to 60% from the earlier 25%. The Union Budget 2026-27 has touched upon a lot of things, but what are the key focus areas, the government's vision and the standout measures? Well, let's hear from experts themselves as they analyze the budget's impact on the India growth story.
What they're essentially saying is you could be a foreign service provider or an Indian service provider, but as long as you store India's data in India, we will give you that tax holiday. And that's like putting an incentive to not exporting data. And we know that data is the new oil. infrastructure related announcements and plans that have been laid out are extremely forward looking. When we think about the railway sector, the 7 high speed rail corridors, the new dedicated freight corridor line between Dankuni and Surat. When we think about waterways, again, a very important intervention for the logistics sector as well as for passenger transit on waterways. So 20 new waterways. Then, thinking about urban development and the fact that tier 2 and tier 3 cities will be prioritized, for capital expenditure.
All in all, we see a different type of budget where we see continuity in 90% of the matters which were addressed last year. But what we see this year, in addition to everything else, is the focus on capex to be further increased. So I see a focus on capex, which is providing downstream multiplier effect to other industries, especially in the case of housing. Challenges have not been addressed, like, for instance, extra subsidy which is coming to urea is still continued. But at the same time, they've been able to see that inflation is kept under control and the budgetary deficit has also been improved, though marginally. But I think there is a good balancing budget which the finance minister is able to do in spite of the large amount of spending on projects.
So I'm very happy that in the last budget as well as this one, there is a big focus. You will see, compared to the history of 50 years of budgets, and I've seen many of them in my life, that this every sector, every industry, every program now, skills are entering. And this is absolutely the key to the future. We can discuss if you want. Recognition that services as job creators. So manufacturing is very important for many things, but the immediate gains, direct gains from of jobs are limited. They are more indirect gains, and many of those involve services.